2 weeks after my own daughter stood in her kitchen and told me, "Mom, I'm sick of you already. Get out of my house." She was on my front porch with Daisies, a box of chocolates, and the painting I'd been visiting in the little gallery on Maple. She held it like an apology with a frame. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, "To the best mother in the world." You want to know what happened in those 14 days between the sentence that cracked my heart and the inscription that stitched it? Sit close. I'm 72, and while I don't run, I can still outpace shame. This is a story about the difference between helping and handling, about how a lawn can tell the truth, and how a single sentence can make an entire house forget how to breathe. My name is Mara. I'm the lady who trims her rose bushes by the moon and knows which neighbor feeds the stray orange cat. I've lived on Terrapin Lane since Richard carried me over our front step 49 years ago, wearing scuffed dress shoes and a grin he'd never outgrow. He used to say our little Cape Cod looked like a sugar cookie after a dusting of winter. We raised our daughter, Lila, in that cookie. We taught her to check the bread for freshness, to iron on low heat, to say thank you to everyone from bus driver to librarian. She grew into a practical woman with a quick mind and stubborn chin, and after her divorce, she became the kind of single mother who keeps going on fumes because the children are watching. For a long while after the papers, she and the kids lived 40 minutes away. Then last summer, Lila bought the blue bungalow right next door. "It'll be easier," she said, "if you don't mind dropping by after school to keep an eye on them. Just until we find our rhythm." She looked at me like she was asking for a crust of bread when I had a whole bakery in my apron pockets. I didn't say yes. I said, of course, and made a calendar. At first, we were a parade. I'd walk my little path between the two houses with a thermos of cocoa in winter and sun hats in summer. I was there for spelling words, soccer shin guards, school picture days, and stomach bugs. I peeled carrots, checked math, kept an eye on screen time, bought the good kind of Band-Aids with tiny rockets on them. We were a page from a brochure. "Look at us," neighbors would say, nodding toward the two houses with matching portraits. An exemplary family. I confess I basked. There is a particular warmth in being useful. It takes the chill out of old bones. But usefulness is a slippery thing, and sometimes it slides into taking over. It started small. I rearranged Lila's pantry because the cereal didn't deserve to live with the tinned tomatoes. I wrote polite but firm notes to the school about lunch options. I took the liberty of tossing a few threadbare t-shirts because who needs a drawer full of fatigue? When the lawn service skipped a week, I called and helpfully switched her plan to a more reliable package without asking. I washed the teddy that wasn't mine to wash and the sweater that wasn't mine to shrink. I meant it as love. It arrived as invasion. The day everything turned, a Tuesday crusted with late March frost, began like any other. I let myself into her kitchen with the key she'd given me and a casserole pan in my hands. The kids were in socks, eating toast, negotiating who gets the jam corner. Lila stood at the counter, hair in a twist, blouse half-buttoned, laptop open to an email that looked like trouble. She had 4 minutes to be a manager, a mother, a woman with both earrings, and a driver who knew that the school drop-off line is a beast you do not anger. I started flipping slices of toast so the butter would melt properly, and that's when my eyes fell on the notice from her doctor's office. A routine test. A follow-up needed. My fingers picked up the phone before my good sense did. "I'll schedule you for Thursday at 9, I said softly, after I'd made the call, after I'd arranged her health like a vase of daisies. "You can use my car that morning. I'll handle the kids." She didn't shout. Lila doesn't shout. She froze. Her shoulders, her face, even her breath, everything paused like a show interrupted by buffering. "Mom," she said, voice so steady it sounded like a knife you could butter toast with. "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know," I said, trying to be breezy. "But these things, they slip. We're all busy." "Mom," she said again, louder but not loud. "Stop. Please. For 1 week. Just stop." I should have stopped there. Any person with enough birthdays to know better would have. But love is a river in flood. It brings gifts and knocks down fences. "I can't just watch you drown," I whispered, not wholly to myself. Something in her broke open then. She looked at the calendar I'd made, at the lunchboxes packed exactly how I like them, at the little stack of mail with my sticky notes on it, at the casserole steaming in the pan like a smug little son. "You're not watching me drown," she said. "You're holding my head under and calling it help." The kitchen went quiet enough to hear the old refrigerator sigh. I felt old and new at the same time. 72 years on Earth, and I'd never realized how my fingers leave fingerprints even when they mean only to trace. "Mom, I'm sick of you already," she said finally, the word sick landing not as insult, but as diagnosis. "Get out of my house." There are words you think you will never hear in your life. Some of them you survive. Some of them you stitch into a pillow and thread your days across them so the sharp doesn't show. I put down the phone. I set a hand on the counter and the other on my heart to keep it from leaping out like an anxious cat. "All right," I told my daughter. "All right." I walked home beside my tidy hedge, past my bird bath, into my kitchen that still smelled faintly of cinnamon. I sat. I listened to the clock tick. The casserole cooled on Lila's counter next door. They were late for school that day, because chaos arrives fast when you are used to a certain choreography. I was not there to snap little shoes or find the mittens. I was not there to clip permission slips or remind anyone about library day. I stayed put. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and I survived childbirth in a hospital that believed in mint tea for pain. My phone buzzed. "Mom," the text said. "Please don't use the key again. I'll bring it by later." I put the phone face down. I have never been good at not doing. But that day, I began to learn the art of absence. The first day, their trash cans stayed at the curb. The second day, the kids ate chips for dinner, then discovered cola will make you feel like you can ride a bicycle up the sky until it drops you. The third day, the lawn, a smug green rug I had kept trimmed like a military haircut, entered its teenage phase and decided knees were its goal. On the fourth day, the school called Lila at work for a forgotten inhaler. She left a meeting and arrived home with her mascara in comets. On the fifth, the cat the kids fed on the porch brought 3 friends. On day 7, a girl from the high school down the hill arrived to babysit. A helpful little comet, ponytail and gum, $3 an hour above minimum wage, and a smile the new century assigns to its young. She lasted exactly 2 evenings. The older one, Ben, 7 and strong-willed as a brick wall. The younger, Tilly, 5 and soft as bread dough but just as elastic. You can pull her any direction, and she bounces back across the room. The babysitter left texts full of polite apologies, then quietly blocked Lila's number. I know, because the orange cat told me by deciding to move its nap from one porch to the other. I watched and didn't. The neighborhood taught me to listen without peeking. I learned the soundtrack of A House in Trouble, the high whine of a vacuum you only run in the urgent places, the late-night murmur of the dishwasher because you remembered dishes when you had one hand on your own tired face, the morning scramble of shoes like storm hail in a hallway, the car that leaves 2 minutes too late to arrive on time, the ice cream truck bell that rings like both a promise and a bribe. The kind of music you conduct with tears and grocery lists. Neighbors started talking. Mrs. Lynn from the corner peered over her fence and told her beans to be brave. Mr. Alvarez, who trims everything square as a soldier, pursed his lips at the dandelions. The HOA, yes, we have one. No, I did not start it. Yes, I ended up on the board because retirements are dangerous. Slid a politely alarmed notice under Lila's door about grass heights and community standards. I did not vote on that notice. I did not sway anyone. This is the truth. Sometimes, letting consequences do their small grim work is kinder than handling someone into dependence. The 12th day was a Saturday. The kids were with their father. He'd taken them to a trampoline park an hour away because guilt is athletic. Around sunset, thunder gathered itself like a black dog along the horizon. The wind came first, tugging at my wind chimes, making the swing on my porch move as if someone thought better of sitting. When the rain hit, it hit like a training montage, heavy, earnest, loud. I watched Lila's living room lamp flicker through my lace curtains. At 9:15, a scream cut the rain in half. Not a terror scream. A frustration scream. My daughter can scream with her mouth closed. It sounds like a tea kettle boiling in the center of your chest. I stood up. I sat down. I stood up again. Don't, I told myself out loud. She asked you to leave. I started a pot of tea because that is my reflex for all human sorrow. I was pouring when someone banged on my door. She was soaked and shivering and already apologizing. I'm not here to fight, she said, hair plastered, blouse dark with rain. The roof leaks. I can't find the bucket. I can't find anything. She shook her head. I can't find myself. You know what I did? I handed her a towel. I did not say I told you so. I did not say anything that would boomerang right back and break us. We found the roof leak together, positioned the bucket, a metal one from my shed that had a past life holding chrysanthemums. We set towels down like emergency medics. Then we stood there watching water fall out of a house that was trying so hard to hold itself together. Do you think I'm a bad mother? She asked. She said it like you ask a doctor about a shadow on an X-ray. I think you're a human one, I said. Which is the only kind we get. Lila cried then. Not the keening of insult, but the quiet kind that washes and leaves the skin new. I told you to get out of my house, she whispered. I've been hearing it all week. The sentence echoes through the forks in my drawer. It echoed through the sugar in mine, I admitted. Lila, I added, I have been running your life with my favorite spoon. It's shiny because I'm old and have polished it with decades of intention. It doesn't belong in your drawer. She almost laughed. The thunder refused to. Will you come help me fix it? She asked finally, small as 5 and tall as 34 at the same time. I will come help you figure out how you want it fixed, I said. And I will sit on my hands when I have to. We didn't talk more that night. We moved. We found the kids' rain boots because leaks require ritual. We discovered 29 mismatched socks under the couch and a family of plastic dinosaurs plotting a stegosaurus takeover. We started a list on a paper bag. The leak slowed. The clock got smug. The storm passed across the street and into someone else's evening. When she left to go back next door, she paused. Tomorrow, she said, tentative as spring. 9? After pancakes. I slept like the moon. On Sunday morning at 9, after pancakes, I brought a yellow legal pad and a pen so satisfying it should be illegal. We sat at her table with our coffee and our stubbornness. The kids were at the end of the table building a city out of cereal boxes. I told them its mayor needed to address infrastructure and snack security. They nodded gravely. I think, I began carefully, we should make a contract. Not a legal one. A we know ourselves one. Because we know us. We ruin good things by loving them too hard and in the wrong direction. Her mouth did the little twist it does when she doesn't want to grin. All right, she said. Terms. We set simple rules in neat lines on the yellow page. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, I would pick up the kids after school, bring them home, and stay until Lila returned from work, unless the office caught fire or a meeting ran over by an honest curve. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she would do pickup. We wrote the exact time when I could let myself in and when I had to leave. We listed emergencies worthy of breaking the rules: injuries, disasters, actual fires, broken vehicles, unexpected fevers. We listed non-emergencies: sorting mail, rearranging drawers, swapping services, making big appointments. We agreed I would knock, not key. We agreed she would text, not assume. We agreed that chores were everyone's, not just mine, because I was the oldest person in a 2-house radius who could fold fitted sheets like a poet. Then we turned to the house. It had opinions now. It had worn the week like bad shoes. The lawn did indeed reach to the children's knees, and while the dandelions were joyful in a rebellious way, the HOA prefers order. Lila called the lawn service herself. She made her own list. A fresh chore chart for the kids with picture stickers, groceries written like a promise, not a wish, a family dinner plan that could survive overtime and traffic, screen time like a dessert, not an entree. I can bring the kids to mine on Tuesdays for dinner, I offered, careful to keep my voice lined with air, not control. You can have one evening when no one asks you where the glue sticks went. That would be nice, she said. Please. I almost cried from the size of that please. It was a bridge built out of one syllable. We were only halfway through our list when my neighbor's doorbell rang like a chime in a cathedral. It was Mrs. Lynn with a tart fresh from her oven, because weathering embarrassment is easier with fruit. It was Mr. Alvarez with his mower, because pride is important but grass does not care. It was the school counselor calling, not about a late library book, but to ask if Lila would like to join a Thursday evening support group for single parents who live by their calendars. They meet at the church basement, she said, and they talk about bedtime, budgets, how not to yell when the milk spills. There's childcare. I'll go, Lila said into the phone. She looked at me while she said it, as if asking for my unspoken blessing. I nodded. If community is a table, you pull up a chair. The kids broke into our meeting to announce that their cereal box city had a new policy. Every citizen must take out the trash. No exceptions. We clapped. By the second week, the house was itself again. Not pristine, pristine is a performance, lived in is a life, but honest. The lawn was trimmed, and the dandelion heads went to seed and flew off to start revolutions elsewhere. The pantry had its own logic, not mine. The kids learned that cola at dinner makes you sleepy at midnight and awake at 3. They also learned that carrots make the rabbit on the chart hop forward toward a Saturday trip to the park. Lila started coming home earlier twice a week, not because the world got easier, but because she told it she had a life to live. And I learned how to sit in my living room and not watch her windows like a theater, but trust them to be their own stage. When you honor a contract with someone you love, time stitches differently. It stops rushing and begins to move like a strong river, steady and toward something. That brings me to the porch and the painting. 2 weeks after that morning when my daughter told me to leave her kitchen, she knocked. I had been reading in my chair, the one with the crocheted throw, when the knock came like a ceremonial drum. When I opened the door, there she stood with daisies and chocolates and a wrapped rectangle as big as a promise. I did something extravagant, she blurted, already crying, already laughing. I took the overtime gig, and this was my gift to me and also to you, and also a sorry that is actually a thank you, and also, she trailed off. Can I come in? We carried the painting to my dining table and unwrapped it like the world inside might be shy. The painting was the one I had gone to visit twice a week at the small gallery on Maple. A local artist had painted 2 houses under an afternoon sky. The small details would slay you, the way the sunlight stroked the shingles, the simple green of the grass, a robin perched on a fence between the 2 yards like a ribbon connecting them. I stood there feeling my mouth make shapes it hadn't practiced in years. I told the gallery owner the story, Lila said, touching the frame. And the artist insisted on meeting me. She said the fence was always the important part, not the houses. The fence that keeps a boundary and also lets you wave. We turned the painting over to see the hardware, to talk about anchor screws and studs, and to argue about whether it should go in my dining room or the wall at the top of the stairs where the morning light pours like milk. That's when I saw it. Words in my daughter's handwriting on the back of the canvas. To the best mother in the world. I have not been, I said at once, ridiculous enough to ruin the moment if she were anyone else. Yes, she said. You have been. You are. Because you stopped. Because you let me try. Because when I asked for help, you didn't say, finally, like a victory. You said, please back. I had a whole speech in my chest about forgiveness and pride and the way love grows up when we do. I didn't make it. I just hugged my girl in my entrance hall where the floor squeaks, and we cried into each other's shoulders like we were watering something. We hung the painting where the morning light would tell its secrets. The kids came over after school and made opinions about the height and whether the robin needed a name. We ate the chocolates for dinner dessert because revenge, in our family, is not a dish, it's a boundary. And it's served best with something sweet after something hard. You want to know the shocking parts? The neighbor down the block told me I was cold for stepping back, and I had to swallow the part of me that wanted to perform sainthood. The HI fines stacked like thin pancakes until Lila called and asked me how to breathe while she opened the envelope. She paid them herself. She asked for a payment plan. When the board voted to grant it, I abstained. Not because I wouldn't fight for her, but because the woman next door can fight for herself, and I'd promised to teach my hands to wait. We still slip. The other week, I moved her mixer to the lower cabinet without thinking so the kids could reach it for baking, but she prefers it on the counter because she bakes when no one is home, and she likes to look at it while she thinks about birthdays. I apologized. She moved it back and kissed my cheek, and we lived. She tells the support group that boundaries saved her sanity. She tells them about the yellow legal pad and the list of emergencies and non-emergencies, and the clause that says soup is always allowed. The kids put our contract into their own language and taped it to the fridge. Nana does Nana things here. Mom does mom things there. We all do family things everywhere. There is a bright crayon drawing of a fence with a gate. If you want to know how the sentence, "Mom, I'm sick of you already, get out of my house," becomes to the best mother in the world, the answer is twofold. First, love cannot be forced into someone else's routine. It curdles. Second, tough love without tenderness is a storm. Tenderness without toughness is a puddle. We needed rain and backbone both. On summer evenings now, we sit on our porches, 2 houses, 1 robin, and watch the kids chalk their futures across the sidewalk. Lila tells me about a promotion she earned not by staying late and living at her desk, but by delegating and copying the way we wrote our home contract into her workdays. I tell her about my roses and the trick of pruning just above the 5-leaflet. We make a little ceremony of 1 cookie and 2 napkins. The orange cat chooses whichever lap looks least occupied and then takes over. We wave to Mrs. Lynn and Mr. Alvarez and the new neighbors who moved in down the block with their own well-intentioned aunt who waters the hydrangeas at 6 in the morning and means to mind her own business, but cannot. Sometimes I still feel the old twitch in my fingers when I walk past Lila's windows and see a dish left on her coffee table. I speak to my hands out loud. "Not yours," I tell them. "There is a painting on your wall to remind you." And when the kids come running into my kitchen shouting about rockets and rabbits and snack security, I invite them to help. I don't fix. I don't handle. I bend down to their height and say, "Show me how you want to do it." They show me. They always have. I'm the one who finally learned to look. That is my revenge, if you need that word the way the internet likes to need things. I avenged myself upon the part of me that wanted to manage her into loving me. I did it with silence, with tea, with a legal pad, with a fence that says stop and wave at the same time. I did it by letting Alon tell the truth. I did it by finding out that the best mothers are the ones who become better when their daughters say a hard sentence in a kitchen on a Tuesday. When you come to my house now, you'll see the painting first thing because I angle the door so the light hits the robin. I'll offer you a chair that leans slightly because all the best chairs do. I'll pour you cocoa or tea and tell you the one real secret in the whole story. We weren't an exemplary family until we broke. We were a performance. Now we are a house with tools. Now we fix what we can and learn to live with what we cannot. And if you happen to peer over the fence as you leave, you'll see my daughter's handwritten copy of our contract on her fridge, right beside a note for a Thursday night group, a magnet shaped like a carrot hopping across a chart, and a postcard from the gallery on maple that says community hours. Someone once told me fences make good neighbors. I know better now. Fences with gates make good families. The day after we hung the painting, the kids named the robin Bridge. It fits. We've started a rhythm my bones hum along to. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, I head next door at 3:30, knock, and wait. When I hear "Come in, Mom," I do. I find the children and the crumbs the children bring with them. I slice apples. I supervise homework. I ask questions with answers that run across the room. We set the table together, badly first, then better. When Lila comes home, she puts her bag down, looks around, and breathes. Sometimes she leans her head against the refrigerator for 10 full seconds. I choose these moments to be invisible, then present. It's an odd dance. It's ours. On Tuesdays, I make a pot of soup at my place, the kind that tastes like grandmother's and garlic. The kids carry bowls to the table like waiters in a tiny restaurant. They tell me stories about school and how a boy named Oliver said he could burp the alphabet, but was stopped at H and was no longer the class myth. We eat slowly. We save the last ladle for Lila to take as a midnight reassurance. I watch her through my front window as she crosses the grass with Tupperware like a baton passing in a relay. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the window, a woman with lines like a map and hands that know the difference between holding and clutching. I think of my own mother, who had her own ways and her own stubbornness. She used to say, "Mara, there is a difference between a door that opens and a door you break down." I did not understand then. I do now. The school year ended with a picnic in the park and popsicles that stained tongues a color not found in nature. Lila stood under an oak, sunlight in her hair, laughing at something the PE teacher said about the relay race. She looked like the woman she was before overtime and dandelions, only steadier. I went to her, took her hand, and squeezed. "We did that," I said, nodding at our children, our houses, our lives. "Together." "I thought you were going to say you did," she teased. "I've retired from heroics," I said. Gave them up for boundaries. In the fall, the kids will go up a grade and forget where they left their lunchboxes with the earnestness of children who trust adults to keep the world from tipping. We will forget, too, sometimes, what we promised. We will have to remind ourselves with legal pads and fences and a painting. We will make mistakes. We will say sorry like we mean it. We will write to the best mother in the world because love is specific. Sometimes it wears rain boots in a living room at 9:15 while a leak discovers itself. Sometimes it holds a towel. Sometimes it sets a bucket down and waits. If you still want the neat ending, the cinematic one, we threw a small dinner the following Sunday. Nothing fancy. 2 chickens slow roasted, green beans with almonds, roast potatoes crisped until they sang when you bit them. Mrs. Lynn brought her tart. Mr. Alvarez brought stories about his mother's garden in the old country and how she measured the year by tomato sauce. The kids put out place cards with scribbles and 3 backward letters. Lila toasted with lemonade because we were practicing moderation like grown-ups. "To my mother," she said, holding up her glass to the light, "who learned to help me less so she could love me more." I didn't make a speech. I don't always have to speak. But later, when the table had nothing on it but rings from sweating glasses and the candle stubs that looked like tiny mountains, I slipped into her kitchen while she loaded the dishwasher and put a small envelope by the utensil drawer. Inside was a second copy of our contract, this one framed, and a note in my handwriting: "I will always knock." She found it the next morning and texted me 3 words: "You taught me." I texted back too, "You asked." The robin still perches on the painted fence in the mornings. I like to think the artist knew what she was doing. I like to think all our houses need a bird. Something small and winged to remind us that we can fly out a little and come back. That's what daughters do when mothers let them. That's what mothers do when daughters tell them the truth in the kitchen on a Tuesday. And if you're listening for it, if you ever find yourself standing in your own quiet house with a sentence clattering in your chest, you'll hear it too, a soft tapping at the door, the sound of someone you love learning how to knock. Months slipped into their places like plates in a cabinet, each with its own chip and pattern. Our contract held, and with it the odd grace of clear expectations. People think boundaries are walls. They are, in fact, bridges disguised as lines. You can dance on a bridge if you're careful. We did. On a bleak Tuesday in October, a letter arrived with the school's crest embossed on the corner. Ben had shoved it deep into his backpack between a fossilized banana and a math worksheet that had met a juice box too early. The note was about a lunchtime incident. A boy had dared Ben to chug a bottle of orange soda in under a minute, and he had obliged, resulting in what the nurse called a spectacular sugar headache and a recess incident involving a kickball, a flower bed, and a very offended first-grade teacher. Lila read the note, sat at the table, and put her head in her hands. "Do I take this as a sign I'm failing?" she asked into the wood grain. "You take it as a sign he's 7, I said. Which is an illness that lasts until 9. We came up with a plan with the school counselor. Ben would help replant the trampled flowers as a lesson in repair. He would write the teacher an apology note that did not use the word, but. He would choose water over soda at lunch for a while, and he would be part of a rotating snack crew that sliced apples with a plastic knife under adult supervision so that his hands had something right to do. He started to come home proud, fingers smelling faintly of Granny Smith. That same week, an anonymous online parenting forum carried a post, "Neighbor neglect," with enough vague details for me to recognize our block. The comments ranged from helpful to unkind. I closed the computer. If you invite 100 strangers into your kitchen, you will leave hungry. Lila didn't read it. I didn't tell her. The best revenge, again, was a Tuesday with soup. In November, the HA turned from lawns to leaves as if the calendar were a cattle prod. Mr. Rourke, vice president, retired auditor, wearer of white socks with sandals, stopped by Lila's porch while she was corralling backpacks. "Ms. Green," he said, "our records show you were 3 days late in addressing the leaf buildup. We will be issuing a modest fine." His voice turned the word modest into something large enough to sit on your chest. Lila swallowed. "I've scheduled a service," she said. "They'll be here this afternoon." "Schedules do not blow leaves," he said. I was on my porch, listening to the wind draw lines through the trees. I could have marched over, reminded him about the grace clause the board always extended the week after a storm. I could have asked him about the pile of leaves in front of his own drain. I could have said the single mother next door is doing more before noon than most committees do in a quarter. I went inside and made tea. The hardest part of love is letting it learn to speak in its own voice. Lila took a breath and did not cry. "Mr. Rourke," she said calmly, "I understand your position. I also know the bylaws allow a 5-day grace period after a significant weather event. Yesterday's wind qualifies under Section 3, subsection D. I will gladly accept any fine after that window if I have not addressed the issue." He blinked. He hadn't expected chapter and verse. She had been reading. The service arrived that afternoon. 3 cheerful teenagers in bright hoodies with rakes taller than their ambition and a leaf blower that sounded like a chorus of bees. The leaves went. The fine did not arrive. "Proud of you," I texted, because praise from a mother can be a small medal if given at the right time. She replied with a single leaf emoji and a heart. December brought glitter and logistics, a combination that makes beautiful messes. We made cookies that were more sprinkle than dough. The kids put on a school pageant in which Tilly, as a star, forgot to twinkle and held her arms out like a traffic guard instead, which made parents in the audience laugh in the way that means no harm at all. Lila and I figured out a choreography for the holidays that did not look like the past, but did resemble hope. The children would spend the morning of the 24th with their father, then run back across the grass like messengers carrying news. We would eat cinnamon rolls and remember their grandfather by telling one more story about the time he tried to assemble a tricycle without reading the instructions. We would visit the gallery on Maple because the artist had a new series of small canvases of ordinary fences under extraordinary skies. We would choose one together as a gift from Bridge, the children said, and hang it at the back door. The anonymous parenting post turned into something less anonymous when a woman I vaguely recognized from the trampoline park approached me at the grocery store, pushing a cart full of good intentions. "Are you Lila's mother?" she asked. "I am," I said. "And who are you?" "Debbie. My daughter Kayla babysat for you for 2 evenings and came home in tears," she said, as if putting a brick down between us to see whether I'd trip. She said the children were spirited. "Accurate," I said. She posted something online. I told her to take it down. "I thought I should tell you to your face, because the internet is not a person. There are so many ways that could have gone. She could have accused, I could have defended. Instead, I surprised myself." "Thank you," I said. "It's hard to be 17 and to meet a family at its worst week. I hope she tries again with a different family on a better week. If she wants to, she can come by for tea and I'll show her the sticker chart that saves our Tuesdays. But only if she wants to." Debbie's shoulders dropped an inch. "I think she might." She liked Tilly. She said Tilly talks like a radio. "She does," I said. "When she's awake. When she sleeps, she hums." Kayla did come by, in January, on a Saturday afternoon that smelled like stew. We sat at my table and I taught her the 3-plate method. 1 plate for what must be done, 1 for what would be nice, 1 for what can be left. She took notes. "My mom says I give up too fast," she admitted. "I say I just know my limits." "Both can be true," I said. "Limits are not walls either. They are doors with locks." She babysat again, and this time stayed. She learned to turn cleanup into a race and to ask Ben to teach her his favorite dinosaur facts while they put on pajamas. She learned that Tilly will do almost anything for a song, especially if it mentions her by name. When Kayla graduated in June, the kids drew her a card with a very tall girl holding a rake because your first impression sticks like gum, even if it changes. January brought something I had not planned for. My left arm began to ache in a way that felt like a forgotten chore. It would start at the elbow and travel to my shoulder, then settle behind my breastbone like an unwelcome tenant. I would sit down and breathe, and the ache would go, like a shy cat ducking under a couch. I said nothing for a week because grandmothers are notorious liars about their bodies. On the 8th day, the ache woke me at dawn, and I dressed quietly, not wanting to disturb the house of sleep. I drove myself to the urgent care because independence is a costume I wear even when the weather doesn't call for it. Lila met me there because Mrs. Lynn saw me leave and called her. That is how neighborhoods work when the fences are right. The nurse took my blood pressure and my hand. "We're going to check everything," she said, which sounds like a threat and a promise at once. The doctor said words like precaution and EKG and let's be safe, and an hour later I lay very still while a machine hummed a song I hope never to hear again. It turned out to be angina, the kind that reminds you your heart is a diligent worker who occasionally asks for a shorter shift. They adjusted my medications. They gave me a pamphlet that had more cheerful clip art than a medical document deserves. Lila cried in the parking lot, the kind of cry that makes your shoulders shake even when you try to hold your breath still. "Mom," she said, voice low and fierce, "why did you not tell me?" "Because I've just learned to stop becoming your emergency," I said, trying to make a joke walk on a wire. "And because I did not want to pull you into the undertow of my worry." "There is a difference," she said, "between handling my life and letting me handle yours." I tilted my head. The student had become the teacher. "Would you like to make a contract?" I asked. We did. On a smaller yellow pad, we wrote new rules. If my chest hums like a strange machine again, I call. If I feel dizzy, I sit and I call. If I need a ride, I ask. If I have a feeling I cannot name, I tell her the shape of it. She wrote her part. If Mom calls, I answer. If I cannot answer, I text a time. If I am scared, I say I am scared and do not turn it into anger because fear will wear any costume to get into the party. That week, she brought over a basket. Inside, my medications in a pretty box with compartments like a jewelry case, a blood pressure cuff that looked like a radio from the future, a notebook with a robin on the cover for writing down readings. "I am not managing you," she said, reading my face. "I am supplying you. You do the management." "Thank you," I said. I strapped the cuff on and let her learn my numbers the way she had learned my recipes. The kids took turns pumping the bulb because anything that makes a noise is a toy if you let it. February arrived with wet boots and valentines cut by small hands. Ben wrote one to Kayla that said thank you for not quitting us, and we deliberated whether it was appropriate to give it to her. Appropriate is another word for careful, I told him. And careful is good, but kindness is better. He gave it to her after school while she waited for her bus home, and she cried, which made him very proud because he had made a person leak with paper and words. The ex, his name is Aaron. I have not used it because names have weight, began to request more weekends. He had met someone, he said, and he wanted the children to know her. Lila flinched. The story of their marriage is theirs to tell, not mine, but I will say this. Some men are good fathers and awkward husbands. Some are good talkers and poor listeners. Some grow up late. Some grow up in time. Aaron is trying. Trying does not erase the past, but it writes better paragraphs in the present. I agreed to meet him and his new girlfriend, a woman named Nina with a laugh that made the children lean in and a purse full of tiny band-aids with cartoon fruits on them. My heart softened like butter left on the counter. Not everyone who arrives after a storm is a roof repair. Some are a window. In March, the school called again, but it was for something else. Tilly had a gift for drawing that made her teacher whisper and grin. She makes fences, the teacher said, and she always draws a gate. She drew our two houses as if the paper were a stage and the pencil the only light. She drew a robin that looked like a touch. When the school announced the spring art show, Tilly asked if she could display her drawing. Of course, Lila said, and then later, do I need to be the mother who brings a tray of treats? You need to be the mother who shows up, I said. Trays are optional. We showed up. We ate small cookies from paper plates and stared at a wall full of color. Tilly's drawing hung at eye level for a child. People bent to see it properly. An older man with paint under his fingernails stood in front of it a long time and said, "That gate is very true." I suspect he was an artist or a gardener, maybe both. April turned the lawn into a green declaration again, as if the earth had a point to make. The robin returned. Bridge looked older to me, if birds can. He watched us as we watched him. I am old enough to believe in omens, but young enough to look for them in small things. The HOA election came around. Mr. Rourke ran for president. I considered retiring from the board because I am tired of arguments about mailbox heights and shade of beige, but Mrs. Lynn talked me out of it with a cup of ginger tea and a whisper, "Beige needs a poet." I do not know if I am a poet, but I can write an agenda that reads like a neighborly letter. I ran for president reluctantly. The neighborhood voted me in gratefully because people prefer leaders whose porches they know. Mr. Rourke became treasurer, which suited his soul. In my first address, yes, we call them that as if we are a nation-state, I proposed a revision to our courtesy notices. Instead of fines first, we would send a knock-and-help note. Your lawn looks overwhelmed. The teen crew is available at a discount. Call if you want a hand. Your fence lost a picket. Mr. Alvarez can help on Saturday. Need tools? We made a library in the clubhouse. We even included a small line at the bottom. If you are embarrassed, you can call me and we will talk about beans instead. The motion passed. Mr. Rourke voted yes, though he checked the math on the teen crew rates twice and suggested a spreadsheet. May brought the gallery's spring fundraiser, a street evening with music and folding chairs and a silent auction that spoke volumes. The artist who painted our houses, her name is Petra, asked if we would lend the painting for the night. It wants to be seen, she said. Paintings get lonely. We took it down carefully, left a paper robin taped to the wall in its place, and carried Bridge to the gallery wrapped in a quilt like a child. Petra placed it on an easel by the door. People stopped as they came in, as if the painting told them, "Pause, look, remember where you live." Lila stood beside it sometimes, telling the story to people who asked. She never mentioned the sentence she had said in the kitchen. She told the part about the contract and the legal pad and the robin's name. I stood across the room and listened because stories travel differently when you are not telling them. At the end of the night, Petra made a small speech. "Fences are not walls," she said. "They are invitations to wave." She gestured toward our painting. "This one taught me that." She presented us with a small gift, a sketch of our two porches, drawn from memory, quick and tender. "For the family who taught me to draw gates," she wrote at the bottom. I cried in the bathroom where the acoustics flatter emotions. Summer arrived like a happy shout, and with it the lazy schedule that ironically requires more coordination. Camps, visits with Aaron and Nina, library reading challenges, the sprinkler hose making a river in the yard that the children turned into an engineering project with sticks and rocks and a plastic spoon. We established a Wednesday night tradition. Porch concerts. The kids made tickets out of index cards. Admission was payable in applause and slices of watermelon. Sometimes Kayla brought her guitar and played songs she wrote in her notes app, sweet earnest things about leaving and staying. Mr. Alvarez clapped offbeat and grinned. Mrs. Lynn sang harmony in a voice that surprised everyone, including her. The orange cat slept through most of it, which we took as a compliment from a notoriously harsh critic. In July, the anonymous parenting forum returned as a real-life incident when a white car with a county seal slowed in front of Lila's house. Two women stepped out, kind-faced, carrying clipboards and a courage that must be hard to wear. Child Protective Services. Someone had called. They were polite. They were calm. They were thorough. We received a concern about the children's supervision and nutrition, the older one said gently. She looked at Lila, then at me. It's our job to ask questions. Lila went very still, the way a deer does when it hears a twig snap. She took a breath. "Come in," she said. We were making sandwiches. I texted Aaron and Nina. They came. We all sat at the kitchen table while the women asked about routines, meals, doctor visits, school attendance. Tilly brought out her chart with the carat magnets. Ben showed his apology note to the teacher from months ago, which he had kept like a certificate. Lila pulled out the legal pad contract and the updated version we made after my angina scare. She spoke in the same voice she used with Mr. Rourke about leaves. Calm. Clear. Not defensive. The women nodded. They asked to look at the kids' rooms. They checked the fridge. They peeked in the pantry and made appreciative noises about the labeled bins, which made me grin because those bins were hers, not mine. After an hour, the older woman closed her folder with a sound that felt like a blessing. We see a family, she said simply. A tired one sometimes, like all, but a safe one. She hesitated. We are not supposed to tell you who called, and I won't. But I will say, often it's someone who thinks love is loud. When they left, Lila sat on the floor and let the children climb her like a mountain. Aaron cried silently in the corner and then laughed, embarrassed. Nina put her hand on his shoulder. We can write letters to ourselves for next time, she suggested, practical as a carefully packed lunch. Proof of routines. A checklist to keep by the door. I made tea because my hands needed to move. When I brought Lila a cup, she held it and looked at the steam. I did not panic, she said. I wanted to. I wanted to call you and say fix this and then be angry when you did. But I didn't. You didn't, I agreed. And if you had, I would have said, I will sit beside you while you speak. In late August, a letter with a county seal arrived. It was from family court. Aaron had filed a motion to adjust the custody schedule. Not a bomb, a request. He wanted slightly more time, given his new stability and Nina's support. Lila read the letter, then read it again. She called him. We will discuss this like people who share the love of two small humans, she said. We will not make our lawyers' children's college funds any larger than they need to be. We went to court anyway, because papers require rooms and rooms require rules. I wore my best blouse and my shoes that look good from a distance. The judge wore weariness like a robe, which it was. She asked questions. Lila spoke about routines and the children's needs. Aaron spoke about his schedule and his intent. Nina spoke once, carefully, about wanting to be a steady adult who did not replace, but supplemented. I spoke only when asked, which was twice, once to describe our neighborhood and our contract, once to describe the children's growth, not in inches, but in how they handled being told no. The judge adjusted the schedule slightly. Aaron got an extra dinner each week and one more overnight every other week. This looks like a family, the judge said, with the weary kindness of someone who has seen other shapes. Keep it looking like that. We exited the courthouse into a blue sky that felt like a permission slip. Lila looked at me. It's not what I would have chosen, she said. It's not what I would have chosen either, I said. But we didn't choose rain boots in a living room, and yet they were right. September unfurled school lists again, and with them the comfort of pencils and packs. The kids went up a grade, shoulders squared, hair combed, shoes that squeaked because new things announced themselves. Kayla left for college 2 towns over and sent the children postcards with drawings of her dorm room plant, which she named Mr. Leaf because she has a sense of humor that delights me. The porch concerts paused, replaced by homework duets and the quiet drum of earlier bedtimes. One Thursday, Lila came home with a look I recognized from when she was 12 and had failed a test she had studied hard for. They passed me over for the team lead role, she said, placing her purse down carefully, as if it were fragile. They said I'm reliable and beloved, but not strategic. I smiled and thanked them, and then came home and wanted to throw my blender at the wall. Let's not throw appliances, I said. We can make smoothies. We did. Mango and restraint. While the blender did the sound work, I asked questions. Is any part of what they said true? I planned too short, she admitted. I get through the week by heroics instead of systems. What would the system look like? She thought. Like the legal pad. But for projects. With gates, she said, then laughed at herself. Milestones. We call them gates at work. Then build them, I said. And when they ask who taught you gates, you can say a robin and a grandmother. She did. In 3 months, she had a plan for her team that the actual team lead asked to borrow. The next time a role opened, she did not get passed over. She walked through the gate she built. Winter came again, as repetitive as forgiveness. We repeated ourselves too, in good ways and bad. I forgot to call after a dizzy spell and got a lecture delivered with love and a notepad. Lila rearranged a drawer and caught herself, cheeks pink with recognition, and put each whisk back where she found it, whispering, "Not my kitchen." The kids had a fight over a game so loud it sent 3 birds into the air from the maple tree, and then they apologized to each other in the language of crackers shared in a fort made of 2 chairs and a sheet. We started a new tradition in February, Yellow Pad Sundays. Once a month, we sit with our pads and write the state of the union of our 2 houses. We jot what's working, what's wobbly, what's wanted. The rule is, no fixing during the meeting. We only name. Fixing happens later, or not at all. This simple ritual has done more for us than the internet could in 1,000 think pieces. It has saved us from the creeping mold of assumptions. It has turned us into co-authors. By spring, other neighbors had noticed. The family on the other side, the Thatchers with the twins who take turns being shy, asked if we would host a little workshop in the clubhouse on family contracts. We laughed until we realized we could. Lila made a flyer with a sketch of a fence and a gate. Petra offered to hang it in the gallery. Kayla made a playlist that was mostly gentle guitar and a few upbeat surprises. We set out pens that felt important in your hand. 15 people came, from newlyweds learning to share a bathroom shelf to a man who took notes for his elderly father and himself, trying to navigate care without resentment. We talked about the difference between rules and agreements, between chores and contributions, between privacy and secrecy. We did not preach. We told our story. We made space for other stories. Mr. Rourke showed up and sat in the back, arms crossed, then raised his hand and said, "I have a sister. She moves my spices when she visits." I hate it. The room nodded, a chorus. He wrote an agreement for Thanksgiving, no moving spices. We will label them together after pie. He left smiling in a way I had not seen on his face since the day he first measured his mailbox. The workshop became monthly. We called it Fences with Gates because names matter, and because the kids declared anything else boring. We printed small cards with the phrase, "Knock first." We gave out yellow pads like candy. People cried, and then they laughed, and then they wrote. The neighborhood changed in small ways that looked like cooperation and felt like relief. One afternoon in June, a storm rolled up its sleeves and got to work. Lightning stitched the clouds to the ground. Wind made the tall grasses dance like a crowd at a summer festival. The power flickered and then decided to take a break. Lila came over with the kids, flashlights in hand. We lit candles and played a game Tilly invented called Shop in the Dark, which involved paying for pretend items with compliments. "I'll buy that flashlight with a compliment about your hair," she said solemnly to Ben, who took his role as shopkeeper very seriously and made change in the form of high fives. We were in the middle of a tense negotiation over a packet of crackers when a pop sounded from Lila's house, followed by the smell of something electrical thinking dark thoughts. Aaron, who had brought over a bag of grapes like an emergency kit, grabbed his own flashlight. "I'll check," he said. I wanted to go too. I stayed. A minute later, he called, "It's the old power strip." I unplugged it. "We're fine." We weren't in danger, but we could have been. The next week, Aaron and Lila spent a Saturday replacing strip after strip with safer options, and I watched them learn the choreography of co-parenting that includes power cords and insurance calls. Nina made lemonade. The kids made a fort under my table and an economy for it, because they are their mother's children. In late summer, Petra asked if she could paint us again. "Not the houses," she said. "The people. On their porches." We resisted. Portraits feel grand. We are not grand. We are people with Tupperware and schedules. But she insisted in a way that made no one feel bullied. "It is not about perfection," she said. "It is about witness." She came on a Wednesday evening, the lights sweet and low. She set up her easel across the street and squinted at us, as if translating. Lila sat on her top step with a cup of tea. I sat on mine with the orange cat in my lap. The children sprawled between, a constellation drawn by chalk. Aaron and Nina stood by the fence, talking with their bodies turned toward the kids. Kayla, home for a weekend, strummed something quiet on the guitar. Mrs. Lynn watered her beans. Mr. Alvarez, for once, let his hedge be crooked. Bridge watched from the maple, a small monarch of our little kingdom. Petra's brush moved like a sentence finishing itself. When she showed us the painting, I did not see wrinkles or a lawn that needed one more pass. I saw a map. 2 porches as cardinal points. A fence not as a barrier but as a line drawn by a hand that trusts. The children were rendered not as tiny adults but as the exact wildness they are. There was a small detail I didn't notice until later. My left hand, the one that aches sometimes, was open. We did not buy this one. Petra donated it to the community center with a small plaque, "Fences with Gates, Terrapin Lane." It hangs in the room where we hold the workshops. People stand in front of it and name themselves. The exclamation in our story, the shock the internet might want, never came as a scandal. It came as a steady accumulation of choices. Still, there was one more turn. In October, Lila's company announced a reorganization. Roles shifted like plates in a cabinet during an earthquake. Her new manager, a well-meaning whirlwind called Damien, believed in disruption the way toddlers believe in stickers. More is always better. He proposed a schedule that would keep her at the office late 3 nights a week for 3 months. "It's a sprint," he said with the optimism of a man whose dinners arrive in takeout containers and whose plans are fake. Lila looked at the calendar, at the kids' music nights and yellow pad Sundays, at the fact of our Tuesdays that keep all of us sane. She thought about taking the hit, letting the home schedule wobble, and then she remembered the court's language. "This looks like a family. Keep it looking like that." She asked for a meeting. She did not bring me. She brought the plan she had written for herself when she didn't get the lead role the first time. Gates, milestones, proof that sprints become marathons if you don't plan the water stations. She suggested alternative hours, a 2-night rotation, a remote option for the 3rd. Damien frowned, then nodded, then frowned again. "Let me think," he said, which in the office is often code for no, but he surprised us both. He emailed the next morning with a yes to her proposal and a note. "Thank you for teaching me what a gate is." She forwarded the email to me with a single sentence. I knocked first. November brought a letter from the county again, this time about me. The senior center wanted to feature our yellow pad Sundays in a newsletter about aging with agency. I laughed at the phrase. Aging is not a project, it is a landscape. Agency is a pair of decent shoes. I agreed. They sent a young reporter who wore hopeful earrings and took notes on a tiny keyboard. "What's the secret?" she asked. "There isn't one," I said. "Unless you count tea and learning a new word for no." She asked about the sentence Lila said in the kitchen. I told her we do not delete the past, we compost it. She looked delighted and wrote down compost, as if it were a revelation. Perhaps it is. We ended that year as we had the last: cookies, pageants, a visit to the gallery. The kids were larger, but still lost socks the same way lost socks prefer, dramatically and without explanation. Aaron and Nina announced they were engaged. Lila looked at me and I looked back, and we both searched for the old ache and found only a ribbon of something else. It was not a wound closing that had happened already. It was a path widening, more adults who would stand by the children when the world asked for too much. The wedding was small and wise. The children tossed petals with the solemnity of surgeons. Nina's dress was simple and had pockets, which delighted Tilly for reasons she could not articulate. Lila wore a blue dress and carried herself like a woman who knows she can build a gate where she needs one. I read a poem about doors that open. Mr. Rourke cried into a handkerchief like a man who finally, unexpectedly, enjoys being wrong. After the ceremony, during the part with cake and people beginning to dance badly and happily, Aaron took the microphone and said, "I want to say something about Lila," and every muscle in my body prepared for an old story I did not want. He surprised me. "She is the reason our children laugh the way they do." He lifted his glass toward her. "Thank you for teaching me how to be a father who knocks." Lila lifted her glass back. "Thank you for opening," she said. "Years do not stop. They layer." The kids grew. We renewed our contracts with new clauses. Ben would knock before entering Tilly's room. Tilly would not use Ben's science set for home spa experiments. Lila moved into a role at work where people asked her for advice about the very things she had once been told she lacked. Damien attended a workshop and brought a yellow pad, awkward as a tall boy at his first dance, and left holding it like a ticket. Kayla graduated and became a teacher's aide, then a teacher, then the kind of teacher who tapes notes to desks that say you are not behind, you are in your own race. My angina behaved itself with the discipline of a student who has learned the rules. My hands learned to love empty time. I joined Mrs. Lynn's bean worship and Mr. Alvarez's hedge liberation movement. We started a little tool-lending library in the clubhouse with labels I made and rules Lila wrote and a donation jar that always had too much and not enough. One September, when the maples had begun their quiet fire, Lila and I stood between our houses looking at the fence. It had weathered a decade of seasons and small feet and one memorable attempt at a tightrope act. A few pickets had gone soft. The gate had begun to catch. "We should mend it," she said. "We should," I said. "And we should save one board to hang inside your house and one inside mine. Souvenirs from the journey," she said. Proof. We scheduled a Saturday. Aaron came with tools. Nina came with sandwiches. The kids came with enthusiasm and an inability to measure. We took the fence down in sections and put it back stronger and kinder. We made the gate swing just so. We sanded the saved boards, and Petra came by on her bike and wrote on them in her looping script with black paint, "Knock first. On the other, I will always knock." We hung mine near the painting. Lila hung hers above the legal pad station in the kitchen, which is what we call the spot by the fridge where pens live and plans begin. When I walk past mine, I sometimes touch the wood. It is smooth. It is real. It says we did this the hard way, which was the right way for us. On the anniversary of the Tuesday in the kitchen, Lila brought me daisies and a card. Inside, "Thank you for not moving my spices." I had to sit down. Love is often fancy, but sometimes it is granular. People ask me, even now, whether I regret those weeks of stepping back, whether I would do it again. I answer the same way each time. I do not regret waiting by my window with my hands in my lap, teaching them to be still. I would do it again, though I hope I don't have to. The sentence hurt. It needed to. Pain is not the only teacher, but it is one of the thorough ones. It leaves notes. Bridge still returns each spring. He has a companion now. The children insist she is called Span because words must come in pairs. They hop along the fence and look as if they are considering municipal policy. Perhaps they are. The children are older now, and their chalk drawings have become more elaborate, cities with transit maps and parks and libraries. They still put a fence through the middle, but always, always a gate. When I tell this story to someone who needs it, at the workshop, on a bench at the senior center, to a woman in the grocery store aisle holding a box of pasta like a question, I begin where I began with you, with the painting and the daisies and the words on the back. And when they lean in, waiting for the scandal, I tell them about the legal pad. I tell them about the Tuesday night soup. I tell them about the knock. I tell them that the most shocking thing was not my daughter asking me to leave, it was me learning how. If you come to Terrapin Lane on a Wednesday in June, you might find us on the porches again. Kayla will sing about leaving and staying. Mr. Rourke will clap off beat. Mrs. Lynn will hum harmony. The children will sell you imaginary crackers in a dark shop that exists even in bright daylight because imagination does not understand the rules of commerce. Aaron and Nina will pass out lemonade that tastes like choosing goodness on purpose. Lila will sit on her top step, back straight, shoulders loose, a woman whose house learned to breathe. I will be on my step, hands open, heart working the regular shift, grateful that love can be both fierce and polite, a guard dog that knows how to sit and stay and come when called. And if you listen closely, under the guitar, under the talking, under the steady click of the orange cat's purr, you will hear it again, the soft tap at the door. You'll know what it is. Someone you love, learning still to knock.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!